Got a couple of subjects to talk about in this video. The first one is the stuff that I talked about in my last video, the CNC in particular, and the idea that I would, okay, well, let me back up a bit. For anyone that didn't see my last video, you should, of course, watch it, but I'll do a quick recap. I talked about the chair that I'm sitting in, the one that I made, not in particular the chair, but the footrest. The way that works is that I designed and I 3D printed gears that make that operate. And in my last video on this channel, I said that I was going to eventually get around to changing those 3D printed plastic gears to wooden ones that would be cut on the CNC. Now, also, we have to go back almost a year, I guess, when I talked about setting up my shop in the shed and moving out of my current shop, which is actually a garage, and converting that back to a garage. And in the meantime, I changed my mind on that, at least for now. You know, it's still open in the future, but for now, it's changed. But in prepping for that, I moved the CNC from the shop down here to my basement. This is my listening room in my basement of my house. And right behind me is the laundry room in my basement in my house. And the laundry room is a little bit big. There is a bit of space in there. I said, this is the perfect place to put the CNC mounted on the wall. So I did that. I brought it in, got it mounted up on the wall, and left it there. I didn't even hook it up at the time. And it sat there for months and months and months because, to be honest, I wasn't using the CNC because of two problems with it. It's the one I got from Stepcraft. And I don't want to beat up on their machine, but I was having problems with that from the get-go. Every time it would make a rapid movement, it would stop and trigger the e-stop. The bottom line is that when I moved it down here, I wasn't enthusiastic about getting it hooked up because I was looking at more problems. So in preparation for thinking about making gears for this chair, I said, I'll hook it up and try it. So I did that. I hooked it up and I tried it, and it was working okay. And I wasn't having any problems. Nothing that I didn't think I could solve. So then I built an enclosure around it. And the enclosure, well, that was the objective from the beginning, to build an enclosure, to encase it and then negatively pressurize that enclosure, as in hook a shop vac up to it so it sucks all the air out of the enclosure, and in doing so pulls air in. So I built the enclosure and I got the machine started up and I tried to cut something, and immediately it was doing the same thing over again. And the way I solved it before was to heavily oil all of the lead screws and the linear bearings, but this time it didn't work. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that it's doing that because it's mounted on the wall and the motor's not strong enough or whatever, but that's not the case. It was doing that when it was still flat. I had it for a very long time, 2 years actually, flat, and on this table that I made that I could wheel around. And it was doing exactly the same thing. So I decided to go to the extreme step of taking the CNC down, taking it all apart, and rebuilding it with, say, a different operating system. Okay? Now, the way that machine came, it was turnkey from Stepcraft. It came out assembled in a big crate. So the problem with that type of system, of course, is that it's completely proprietary. I decided that a better approach, more of my do-it-yourself approach, where I build my own tools, would be to rebuild it using a lot of the parts, well, using some of the parts from the original machine, and rebuild it in a more generic style, as in use Mach 3 as the operating software and replace the motors with ones that are, first of all, bigger and stronger, and also real closed loop. The Stepcraft machine operates on something that they call semi-closed loop. And I think that was the problem I was having. Whenever the machine ran into a bit of a bind, as in it started to, slow down, it triggered that e-stop thing. And that, I think that was part of the semi-closed loop thing that they had going on there. So I ordered the motors and I started redesigning the CNC in the new image, mostly from Baltic birch plywood. The base, I was originally going to use 5/8 inch melamine for the base, but I used all that on my enclosure. I didn't have any left. I only had a piece big enough to put on the wall so that I could flatten the wall. The wall where that was going wasn't flat at all. So I took this piece of melamine that was just slightly smaller than the CNC, and I put that on the wall. The thing about a melamine is how extremely flat it is. Okay, so I put that on the wall, glued and screwed in place. I was careful when I glued it on when I screwed it on, not to distort the shape, the flatness of it. And that plays out after I got the CNC put on the wall. But where I did the work on the CNC was in my kitchen, up on my kitchen island, because, okay, I could have done it out in the workshop, and then I had to carry the thing in, fully assembled type thing. And you know what? I lived here, 10 years without that kitchen island. So like a big open space in the middle of the floor there. So the kitchen island, I miss it, but I much rather have a nice, comfortable, warm environment to do the work. So that's what I did. I started building it right there on the kitchen island. And when it was ready, I carefully brought it down here, got it inside the enclosure, and mounted up on that board that I had put on the wall to make sure it was flat. After I had it up, I got everything hooked up. I built the controller thing for it. It's still out in the open. I don't even know if I'll ever enclose it because it really doesn't need to be. After I had it up on the wall, I got it hooked up and I did some rudimentary or preliminary tests on it. I checked to make sure that, first of all, it was cutting square. The next thing I did, because I was kind of putting this off because I didn't want to know if it was bad, is I did this cross-string test where you can tell if something's twisted very cheaply and easily. What you do is you take two strings. I used sewing thread, actually, nice and fine. And I put it from the top corner on one side down to the bottom corner on the other, on the top of the rail, that is. And where they meet in the middle, if they're just touching, the rails are parallel. They're coplanar. Okay, the top of the rails are coplanar. There's no twist. And luckily, that was the case. It was nice and flat and not twisted. So from there, I started making gears just as kind of a practice thing because, okay, the first thing you got to do is get used to a new software. Mach 3 is new to me. Like I said, I was using the other Stepcraft one, the UC CNC or whatever it is, and also getting used to the machine and how it was working. And I got to say that everything I did on it was flawless. And the machine worked perfectly, okay? No stalls, no stopping, no problems, no skip steps or anything like that. Home the machine, put it where it needs to go, do your cutting, done. Absolutely perfect. No problems with the machine whatsoever. Oh, I left out the step where I put the slats on the bed and then I resurfaced those. And here's an example of stuff. Okay, I just did this one this morning. This is the fixed gear for this thing. And I know you're saying, well, okay, this is all done. And I thought you said that the plastic gears were fine. Well, they are, and they're still working. No problem. Like I'm using the chair right now. And I have been for the past month, you could say, with the plastic gears. But this is the getting to know the machine phase. So I made this one this morning. This is in 2 layers of 1/2 inch plywood. I made this fixed gear with the part that sticks off here first, and then I made this pad to pad it out to the right thickness. The idea is to use FreeCAD for all of the modeling that I'm doing so that like I won't have to mess around with V-carve. That was another thing I didn't like about the Stepcraft. I was kind of locked into using V-carve because I didn't have a post processor for the Stepcraft machine with FreeCAD. Okay, I'm using FreeCAD to make the models for this stuff. I would like to use FreeCAD as the CAM program as well. And you can do that if you're using Mach 3. So another step saved. I can model something in FreeCAD, and then I can export the G-code directly from that based on the model that I made, and it will be exactly like the one that I would 3D print. The first one I made was a set that drives the strut outwards, and that was really tricky because I had to make the 2 gears and key those so that they're hexagonal in the center for the shaft. I also made the shaft, or at least I cut the ends of the shaft. I made the dowel, 3/4 inch dowel out in my shop, brought it after cutting it to length. I clamped it inside the CNC machine and I cut that hexagonal shape on the end. It was absolutely dead on fit in those hexagonal holes in the gears. I said there were going to be 2 topics that I want to talk about. This is the second one. In my last video, I got a comment from someone, because I happen to be talking about what I could be doing on my main channel from now on, because I'm slowing down on the builds type thing. You know, I thought I was half joking around, but the comment that I got, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it basically said that I shouldn't talk about politics because my politics, okay, I think specifically what he said was that as a European, my politics, as in mine, me, were cringy to this European. First of all, I don't have any politics, okay? I think that politics, for the most part, as we know it today, should be made illegal. Okay, most of it should be thrown away, as thrown away as possible. Get rid of it, as much of it as you possibly can. Take away this idea of popularity when you go out and pick somebody to run the country. Remove it altogether. Take away all the gamesmanship that's involved with politics. But now, I could have said that in a comment. I could have replied to him in a comment. But increasingly, making comments on YouTube, even for the person that owns the channel, runs the channel, is a waste of time, because YouTube will censor that comment, either remove it completely. The bot reads the comment, decides whether it's offensive. If it's too offensive, it deletes it completely, or it hides it from view. And when it does that, it doesn't even notify the person that you're replying to that they got a reply. Anyone making comments in the comments section should know this by now, because YouTube has been up to this for the past 3 years. They've been hiding, censoring comments. They've been pushing unpopular ones down to the bottom of the list, and they've been deleting and hiding comments. I've said this before, and in fact, there were a couple of replies to that comment that he made about my politics being cringy to a European. And at least one of those is hidden. The YouTube bot decided that it was inappropriate. Anyway, so I want to talk about a little bit about, you know, my so-called politics. My politics are not politics. I have a worldview. I have a operating philosophy that I go by. And my operating philosophy basically puts first the individual and throws away the group. The group has limited utility for the individual, okay? So individual first, freedom first, all of that good stuff, in my opinion. I live in Canada, and Canada, okay, let's talk about Europe for a second here. Europe is circling the bowl. Okay, it's halfway down. Okay, but down, like already going through the pipe on the way to the sewer, is Canada, because of the cringy, well, the non-cringy politics that the Europeans favor. Okay, that's the result of the politics that are non-cringy for the Europeans. Okay, it's Europe circling the bowl on the way down, and Canada already well underway on the way to the sewer. The US is not immune to that either. It's being changed all the time. But the thing that Europe and Canada and the US don't have in common is the amount of economic progress these countries have made. I made a video on this channel a couple of years ago, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago even, saying Canada is going broke. And at the time I got a lot of backlash from people. Oh, you're crazy. Well, okay, look around today. You'll see, yeah, Canada is in trouble economically. I'm still here in Canada, but if I was 15 years younger, okay, I'm 58 right now. If I was 43, I wouldn't be here anymore. I would have moved out already. All right, I'm here now. I'm kind of settled in. I'm basically heading into retirement, so it's not actually worth my while to move now. But if I were 15 years younger, 15 years ago, in the state that Canada is in today, I would have left already. It would have been gone. Now, to illustrate the difference between the US and Europe, okay, Europe is several countries. Okay, this is US, one country, and Europe, several countries, all combined. To illustrate the economic difference between these two, I found this graphic that you'll see on the screen right now, and it shows the number of companies created in the last 50 years with a $10 billion or more market cap. That big pile over on the left is the US. That little speck beside it is all of Europe. That'll give you a fair idea of what direction Europe is heading in. Remember, Europe existed before the US was discovered by Europeans, that is. And Europe is actually the birthplace of the freedom that people like me would like to see more of.